Well, happy Monday. Today is Monday, May 11th, 2020. My name is Angela Hooper, Menifield, and this is your HR Moment with Menifield Associates. So I hope you guys have had a great day. It's Monday, new week, new opportunities. There are definitely signs that we are returning to some sense of normalcy in our lives. So I think that's a really good thing. I didn't move my comments part over. Okay, yeah, so definitely. And for if you're a sports fan like me and you happen to be a fan of some of the standard shows on the sports channels, you probably also saw today that many of those shows were back, which suggests again in other places, some sense of normalcy is returning, not totally. So that's exciting. Today was a busy day, started out pretty early with President's Roundtable for BNI. Left there, went to my mastermind, left there, did a training. So I want to say thank you and a shout out to Newark Emergency Services for Family and my friend, but also fellow leader in the city, Amina Bay, for always bringing me in to give me an opportunity to work with her team. And like so many leaders, she's in the process right now of preparing her team to return to the new normal. And so talking about what that looks like. And it's so interesting how some of these topics arise as a result of some of the things that people are going through. And so as we began to talk about things, and I thought it was a really great training today, because we began to talk about what life has been for many of us, but then also how do we adjust and how we, again, have the new normal? How do we help people? Hey, how do we help people transition back to whatever that's going to look like for them? And so in the midst of this conversation, and even though this wasn't the topic, the conversation led to doctor's notes. Because some people may not return to work, or some people may return to work with a limited scope, or the way they work may be different. And so in discussing who needs to be in different trainings as we move forward and transition with the team, I realized that maybe I had not done a good enough job in explaining how to handle PII. So that's, hey, Linda. So that's what we'll talk a little bit again about today. And I know we've talked about this topic before, but here's what we know about knowledge, right? The best way to know how to do something is to be exposed to it. Studies say about 7 times. And so number one, that's one thing. But the second thing about it is people join at various times of their exposure to me, and they may not have listened to all the calls. So it definitely does not hurt to share the same information. So what is PII? Well, PII is an acronym, and it stands for Personally Identifiable Information, okay? PII. And so when we talk about PII, what we're actually talking about is things like people's name and date of birth, their address, it could be their social, things like that. And so these are the things that people refer to when we say PII. And so how do you handle that? Well, in addition to those things, and typically it's those things put together, paired. Either, your date of birth alone isn't PII unless it's attached with your name, right? Because now people have additional information about you. But as we talk about this, it's like, okay, so where does medical information come into play? Well, medical information is PII for a few reasons. So while most doctor's notes don't have your date of birth or your place of residence on it, it has your medical information. And so, there's legislation, and the acronym for that is GINA, genetic information. What's the N for? Genetic information. I'll have to find it really quick. But so there are laws and regulations that also protect us from being discriminated against based on our genetic information. So here's a perfect example. Now, we would hope no employers do that, but some do. So if, for instance, I'm predisposed for, some type of cancer because it runs in my family, high blood pressure, diabetes, people have been known to make hiring decisions and other decisions based on people's genetic information, which is the reason why that legislation came into play. So when we begin to put all these things together, we can see why medical notes become a part of the PII. And I like to use the phrase, only those with a need to know. So let's just say theoretically, I'm off work today, but because this morning I had a medical appointment and I went to an oncologist. Immediately, what is that telling you? Now, it doesn't necessarily tell you that I have cancer, right? But it tells you something in that vein. And the question just becomes, who needs to know why I'm out or that I'm out? We're supposed to make our sick leave requests according to most organizations. We make these requests to supervisors, right? So technically, your supervisor needs to know you had a doctor's appointment. But why does the administrative timekeeper need to know that? So that wouldn't qualify as a need to know. But in most office situations, and again, my office was the same because I didn't know any better. I would get the doctor's notes, and when a person, back then we had paper leave requests. We later moved to electronic leave requests, but I would attach this doctor's note to the leave request showing why I approved it. And then the administrative person would take the note, the approved request or denied, if the request was denied, put it in the time and attendance folder because their responsibility was time and attendance. And so basically it would be accessible to anybody who handled time and attendance. So unknowingly, I was putting this medical note in a place that it didn't belong. One of my other responsibilities, thank you, Linda, you're awesome. You know, it's late Monday, my mind is brain, but GINA is the acronym for Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act. Thank you for that, Linda. And so, as I was saying, unbeknownst to me, I was putting this information in a location that other people could have access to it. So what does the timekeeper really need to know in order to designate time and code it appropriately? Mainly, they just need to know if the request was approved or not. They don't need to know the why. For lack of a better word, it's none of their business. And so as a supervisor, I am not to give those notes to administrative personnel, to timekeepers. Medical notes of any kind should be kept in a locked file cabinet where only the supervisor and or his designee has access to them. Now, supervisors, you're thinking, that's just something else I have to keep up with. Yes, exactly. You're the only person that needs to see that note because you're making the determination if the note is in compliance with whatever sick leave rules and regulations you have within your organization. So you either approve or not. The approval form with your signature that either says yay or nay, that needs to go to the timekeeper. But let me be perfectly clear. The note which you base that decision off of is nobody's business. And your employees have a right to know that that information is protected. And so as such, I was having the conversation today. And again, I thank, Newark Emergency Services for Family for the great training today because it made that topic come up. And I'm not suggesting people were violating it. It was just clear to me that everybody didn't have the awareness as to what to do with these types of things or not. And it just flowed from a generic conversation. I tell you that for a couple of reasons, because oftentimes these are the times and places where we think of things as we start troubleshooting and thinking about when and where we're going back to work, how we're going to deal with the situations and trying to be proactive. So again, let's just give them a shout out for being proactive at trying to prepare for returning to work. So again, supervisors, to kind of bring this full circle, you do not put medical notes, as in notes from doctors, notes from, testing, anything like that in a time and attendance folder, nor do you give them to your timekeeper. As Linda just posted on my thread, they don't need to know why. They don't. They just need to know if the request was approved or not. You as the supervisor, the person who makes that determination, are the only person that needs to see that, and or your designee. Here's the other thing about that. Some of you may say, well, what if, because when a person returns to work, they bring the note to the front office person and administrative person or the timekeeper because that's their normal operating procedure. So one of the procedures that I implemented in the office is we just bought blank notes that said confidential. I'm not sorry, not notes, but envelopes. And so when people would bring medical notes to the front office, because again, that's just, especially depending on what kind of work environment you're in, if you have a lot of employees, we had a lot of seasonal employees, people without desks and access to computers, they would bring their notes to the office. So we implemented a policy where all the timekeeper would do is pass the person an envelope. As in, they didn't touch that person's note. It was really important for me to protect the privacy of the individual. So they would put the note, give the envelope to the employee. The employee would then put that note in an envelope and write the name of their supervisor on top of it and seal it. And so now, as timekeeper, the administrative person, the receptionist, whatever my role is, my only job is to deliver a sealed confidential envelope to the applicable party. For me, it was really important to implement even these extra procedures because I was trying to protect the timekeeper. Because the worst thing that can happen, because we're not just doing this because we think they're complicit or they'll do something wrong with this information. But let's just say something about my medical information gets out. Like I'm friends with somebody at work, but of course I don't assume my friend said something, but other people start coming up to me and say, oh, Angela, I'm so sorry to hear, I heard, you may have to go on dialysis because of your blood pressure problems or whatever. And now I'm offended because someone is talking to me about this that I didn't tell personally. It is not uncommon for us to assume it came from the front office, right? Because we gave them our notes. And so you're not just protecting the person whose medical information this is, you're actually protecting your office and your organization. Because again, the Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act is in play for a couple of reasons. And we can have a deeper dive on that. But it's hard to accuse us of discriminating based on genetic information if we never knew it, right? So maybe somebody else in the office has a vacancy and I apply for it and then I don't get selected and I'm paranoid, or I believe, maybe it's not paranoia, that part of the reason why I wasn't selected was because of my genetic information, right? Now I have to prove that that's possible. Well, the more people that knew it, that were in the decision-making circle, the more probable it is I can prove it. But if the office or the organization does a great job of limiting my exposure and they educate us all and explain to me that my responsibility is to only give that note to my supervisor and how to do so, they have reduced their liability too. So I think that's important. Don't see it as a limitation, see it as a protection for you, because you cannot be found guilty of using information to discriminate that you never had to start with. Sounds like a lot. Again, we can talk about Gina at a later time. We actually discussed this Saturday in our HR class, which is another reason why it was on my mind. So thank you, Linda, as always. I love you lots. I appreciate the fact that you always check in and you post and you keep my memory fresh. But the takeaway from today's video, and I'm waving at a few people who jumped on, thank you so much. But the takeaway is supervisors, managers, timekeepers, people who are in the position to receive medical notes, do not, I repeat, do not put them in regular time and attendance folders, nor do you put them in regular personnel folders where other people who don't have a need to know can access them. Medical notes should always be kept separate from regular personnel files and under lock and key for only the supervisor and or his or her designee. So we bought little lockable file cabinets that were kept in the supervisor office. These files were not even kept in the front office with everything else. So some of you may be thinking that's an added expense. No, it's an added protection. Again, my medical information, your medical information is private, and we all have a right for it not to be shared with people in the workplace because they do not have a need to know. I hope this has been informative. If there's something else, a question you have about this, because this is different or new than your past practice, I would love for you to, let me know so that we can dig deeper, because the point of these HR moments are not just because I like Facebook Lives, because I really don't. They're here to help. Linda says managers and supervisors often forget, since this doesn't happen too often. So true. And again, Linda, I also think it's our nature to want to put the medical note with the timesheet, right? It's just because logically it would make sense. Logically, that would be the place to put it. And so the reminder is, while it may sound logical, that's one of the worst things you could do. Do not do that. So if you need some help figuring out how to do that, and you want to talk deeper about your office situation and how you're handling it, reach out. I'd love to help. But okay. So again, my name is Angela Hooper Menifield with Menifield Associates, and this has been your HR Moment for Monday, May 11th, 2020. I have to jump now and go into my speakers club, but I just wanted to get this video done today, and we will see you guys on Wednesday. Thank you so much. And again, as always, Linda, thank you. And those of you who are watching these videos, ask your questions, ask your questions, because you may need help, and that's what we want to do. Take care. Talk to you soon. Bye.